I was recruiting somebody to work on least developed countries in French-speaking West Africa. I found some guy in the back of a Jeep, a Dutchman who'd lived there for 15 years. He applied for the job. There were 100 other people. He actually was the best person there, PhD in economics from Utrecht or someplace. Anyway, all of a sudden I get a call from the Secretary General's office. You haven't looked at the Sudanese candidate. I said, well, what do you mean the Sudanese candidate? He was a lawyer. He doesn't speak French. He knows nothing about West Africa. What do you mean? I looked at him seriously. Well, we're getting really serious pressure from the Sudanese mission. I said, you got to be kidding. So what I did was I simply called up a friend at the Dutch mission and said, would you make one phone call to the Secretary General's office and say you're interested in this Dutchman? And that was all it took. That was the end of the conversation. If you speak to people, I was just speaking to Sakiko Fukudapara, the meeting we had in Uppsala a couple of weeks ago, on reactions to the Human Development Report, because 20 years later, people are still reacting to it. She says what it usually takes is sort of taking the second secretary from the Egyptian mission in New York out to lunch or something, that much of what passes for huge pressures from governments, you need to just stand up to. And so we just have a difference in appreciation here of what it takes to stand up. On criminal prosecution, we ought to talk about the ICC, because in fact, issuing this warrant arrest to al-Bashir when no one was going to do anything exposes the feebleness of the system, and I think it's ultimately going to backfire. In fact, I would speculate that probably 15 African countries that had signed it are probably going to follow the Bush administration and unsign it. There's a movement in New York on that drag. So I don't disagree about how you, when you need to be diplomatic and undiplomatic. I think in that case, it's mainly, exposing the ICC emperor with very few clothes on, because if you're going to do these kinds of things, there has to be some follow-up. You can't issue a warrant with no expectation that anything's going to happen. I think that was the case.
My question relates to introductory lowest level employment. And there we have the perennial conflict of geographic distribution versus merit. Well, I begin with the premise that intelligence and talent are more or less equally distributed around the world, but that opportunity has not been. And therefore, what appears to be merit is unequally distributed because of opportunities that people have had to go to Princeton or Yale or Oxford or Cambridge or wherever. So the question is, if we followed your suggestion and had really truly competitive entry exams which tested intelligence and aptitude, might we then recruit people who show promise but have not had much experience that would make them competitive if there were a level playing field, and then subject all new recruits, all new low entry-level requirement appointments to a year of in-house training where they would be subjected to a common administrative culture. And then after that year, the disparity between people who have talent but have not yet acquired much merit, the disparity between them and the people who have had more opportunities would be diminished, and one could weed out people who didn't come up to a certain standard and thereby improve the quality of the UN civil service.
Actually, a good idea. Training in general is not a long suit of the United Nations, nor is either mid-career or at the beginning of the career or the end of the career. I mean, ACUNS at one time tried to start a sabbatical program, which then sort of fell apart because people were worried about going back to jobs, et cetera. I was just speaking with Roland about, he was asking me about what kind of sort of historical knowledge there are for new officials. The answer is there's not much. You get to explain the charter. There's really not an indoctrination, so that people don't understand, you know, what happened in the founding of the organization, what was the context surrounding the NIEO, and how the group of 77, they have no sense for where the organization's been, why it's been where it was, how it's developed to where it is. So there would be a two-part argument, I think, for your training. One, to perhaps give people a chance and see whether, you know, during this interim period, which is supposedly part of what goes on now, but doesn't happen. Once you're there, it's virtually impossible to get rid of somebody, to implement that, but to mix it together with certain kinds of training. Good idea. Yeah. What, you're going to cut me off? Okay, well, you can turn off my microphone.
Maybe we can thank Professor Weiss with a round of applause. Tom, I'd like to thank you not only for a very eloquent and thoughtful Holmes lecture, but also for your service as chair over the last 3 years. As Krister mentioned, Tom steps down this week while we're here in Trinidad, and he will move into the position of past chair. And I just want to say what a pleasure it's been for us to work with you. I can certainly vouch for the fact that Tom approaches his work with great dedication, great integrity, and great humor. And not only have I learned a lot from working with you, but I've had a lot of fun. We wanted to give you a gift to mark the time that you've spent as chair. And I know you're going to kill me when you try to take it home because it is breakable.
Can I drink it?
No, you cannot. Since the Holmes lecture is named for a Canadian, and since you have overseen a secretariat that's been located in Canada, we wanted to give you something with a Canadian flavor. And what we chose for you is a glass sculpture by a Canadian artist, a sculpture of an Inukshuk. Now, the Canadians in the room know that an Inukshuk is something that we associate with the Inuit people. And for the Inuit people, when they go out to hunt, they typically erect small stone Inukshuks along their path because they know that the path, when they return home, will be covered over with snow. So in order to find their way, they can follow the little Inukshuks that they've built. And we thought that that was an apt symbol because we know that you've guided the organization and we know that you've helped us all find our way, not only as chair, as executive director, and as editor of Global Governance, and I hope that you'll continue to do so as past chair. So thank you so much, Tom. Okay, well, while you're opening that, so you can show the Inukshuk, I would like to make one announcement, and that is to let you know that each year the Friends of ACUNS holds a competition for the best book published in the last year or so on the UN system. And this year, the winner of the book award is Benjamin Schiff. And he wrote a book called Building the International Criminal Court, a 2008 Cambridge University Press publication. So Benjamin is not here in Trinidad with us, but we will certainly make sure that there is great recognition for his important work. There are typically many, many excellent submissions for this book award, and this year was no different. Melissa Labonte, where's Melissa? Melissa was one of the wonderful people who agreed to read all of the books that were submitted, and I think she can attest to the fact that really it's always a tough choice. So we certainly congratulate Benjamin Schiff for that work. While Tom is carefully dealing with the bubble wrap, I'll take advantage to say a few more things. Just to remind folks that we're going to take a quick coffee break, and we'll be back here pretty quickly for a 3-ish start with our 2 ambassadors from New York talking about small states.
Oh, that's lovely. Terrific. Oh, look at that. Oh, that's great. Thank you once again. Oh, well, we should let people look at it.
Yeah. So we'll take a bit of a break, and we'll reconvene here 3:05 for the next plenary. Thank you.